Good evening, council members, staff, and Empower InnServices staff. Welcome. We're going to open our special council meeting for November the 27th. I don't think I have to read that because everybody here knows it. We just asked for a mover and a seconder for the approval of the agenda. Councillor Waters, Councillor Van Berkel, all those in favor? That's carried. Are there any disclosures of interest on this item? Seeing none, looking for a recommendation to go into closed session to deal with one item. Moved by Councillor Nichols, seconded by Councillor Payne. All those in favor? That's carried. We shall be back, hopefully not too long, but keep the seats warm. We'll be right back. Point 1, the closed session matter. Can I have a mover and a seconder to approve what the decisions were in Donna and Kevin? I'm sorry, I'm not closed session anymore. Councillor Orsatti and Councillor Ices, all those in favor? That is carried. I hope that's my one faux pas for the whole evening. Now, we can rise and report from the closed, we did that already, sorry. Do you want to know, so you needed a rise and report and now you need a, okay. So this is a mover and a seconder for the information that we discussed in camera. Dan and Carolyn. I did it again. Deputy Mayor Davidson and Councillor Payne. All those in favor? That is carried. I'm glad there's nobody watching. So here's our conundrum, people. We said in our advertising that this presentation was starting at 6:30. So do we take a chance that somebody is going to log on at 6:30 and be very upset that we started without them, or do we carry forward and?
We live in a time warp. Carry forward.
Your Worship, the recording will be up on the YouTube website. If someone did want to rewatch that first few minutes of the presentation, they could do that.
Okay, so can I have concurrence from members of council? Any opposed to doing that? No hands up, so that means we're all in favor. Okay, so we'll invite Mr. Malcolm forward and welcome him to council chambers.
Thank you very much. Good evening, Mayor, Deputy Mayor, and Council. This is a report for InPower, InnServices, and Enterprises, our quarterly report, and our last one for 2019, and we'll do the quarterly reports again starting in 2020. So for InPower, the customer growth has continued on a trajectory that we established a while ago, back in 2017. In 2018, we grew by 5.4%, and we're projecting in 2019 through our budget to grow by 3.19%. So growth has slowed down a bit in the town of Innisfil, but also in South Barrie. South Barrie, the development is key to some of the road developments that are happening in Barrie. And once those roads are completed, then the subdivisions will be opened up to development. So we're seeing a little bit of a slowdown now because of the delays on the road works. But from the development community, we hear once that gets going, there'll be full steam ahead. HR staffing, so at InPower we have 45 full-time staff. We have a number of temporary and part-time, and we also have a couple that are on leaves. One's a maternity leave, another one's on a long-term disability leave. Our recruitment, quite busy again for InPower, lots of changes happening, people moving into different positions, hiring of new positions, keeping up to what we need to accomplish on the electricity side of our business. 2019, our collective agreement expired, so we successfully negotiated a new collective agreement with our power workers union. That was ratified June 7th by our board of directors and by the members on June 11th. And the new collective agreement is for a 3-year period, and it will end at June 30th. Previously, it was July 7th was the end date, and an agreement between the union and ourselves was to make it at a month end as opposed to a first week of the following month. Some of the key components out of that collective bargaining is we'll be setting up a new labor relations committee. So it's to get the involvement of both management and the union involved in a quarterly meeting to ensure that everyone's on the same page and we're working through issues as need be. It's typical within all industries, but for this union, it was something that was never done before. We're also looking at redoing our job descriptions and going through a pay equity review for all our unionized positions as part of the pay equity legislation. Training, as you can see, lots of training that happened in the second and third quarter. These are to make sure that all staff are up to date on health and safety, as well as any work-related training that is required to complete their work. Staff movement, it's one thing that we're really proud of, is that we have a lot of internal movement. So when we post jobs, it's the folks that are working there already that move into new positions. So they've taken extra courses, we've given them additional assignments, and they've moved forward in their career at Empower, which is great. Health and safety is still a key component of our industry. We meet on a quarterly basis, and the dates of the meetings are noted on the slide. As of today, there are no pressing issues with any health or safety issues at Empower. Commodity charges. The biggest change that has happened with the new provincial government is that effective November 1st, they wanted to ensure that the residents seen what the true cost of electricity is, so the supply component of the commodity. So as you can see, the rates are really extreme compared to what they were before. So off-peak at 10.1 cent, mid-peak at 14.4, and the on-peak at 20.8. The government has still committed to managing the increase to about inflationary, so 1.8%. So what the customer will see, well, they'll see these rates, they'll see what the true cost is, but then there will be a rebate on their bill to account for the additional cost over and above what the 1.8% is. So the customer will get a rebate that will bring it back down to what the provincial government promised all the customers. Social media is still one of the key components that we use for communicating with our customers. We're seeing tremendous support from the community. Any outages that we have, it's always on Twitter and Facebook, and those are rising pretty good, 5% and 17%. We started Instagram last year in November, and to date now we're up to 140% increase in people looking at us through Instagram. So the social media is taking hold within our community, and it's being well received. Another item that we're very proud of at Empower is our customer engagement, going out into the community and helping the community. So through donations, through different events that our social committee at Empower has held, our employees have donated over $1,200 to the food bank and over 1,000 pounds of food. We've attended the Maker Fest in 19, and we also attended Cookstown Cares. We're constantly meeting with our customers out in the community, and we're being well received. We're looking at additional things in 2020 to get more engagement, looking at sort of a residential group of individuals to get together with us on a quarterly basis to talk about our projects, our programs, and making sure that we're addressing their needs and ensuring that our programs match what they're looking for as an electricity distributor. The key accomplishments are basically trying to automate a lot of the paperwork that we do to ensure that in a short period of time we'll be a paperless organization. By having everything accessible through non-paper format, all electronic, it provides everyone from customer service to our line staff seamless opportunities to see what information is available to them and help them make decisions while they're out in the field or in the office dealing with customers. One of the biggest things when I first started at Empower, our reliability and the outages were extremely high for our community. We've, over the past 3 years, made a lot of investment in our distribution system and our upgrades, and as you can see, the dividends are paying off. The outages have decreased substantially, and we're very proud of the fact that the customers are not seeing as much as they did previously. The reliability statistics, you can see that it's slowly dropping. You can see from 2018 to 2019, quite a difference in interruption duration. The system average has also gone down significantly, so that's the number of times the power goes out for the average customer. We had a lot of interrupting, flickering powers, trees brushing on our lines last year. Through vegetation management, tree trimming practices, we've managed to bring that down significantly. Momentary outages, so the number of times the power flickers has also gone down for the customer. So to give you a snapshot, major unplanned outages have gone down 42%. Our average interruption duration has gone down 79%. Our average interruption frequency, so the average times per customer, has gone down 82%. And our momentary outage interruption has gone down by 84%. So these are very key statistics for our customers, and it's a lot of great work by our staff at Empower to get these numbers down. Energy and power statistics, with our growth, obviously the demand for power is increasing. With the conservation in play, most people have taken advantage of conservation tools, and it has come into play. So now what we're seeing is the growth coming from the growth of our customer base. Total consumption, the trending that we're looking at is pretty flat line. The peak demand has gone up, and the peak demand, that's what we base where our stations should be and when we should build those stations. So with our peak demand increasing, that's when we start looking and planning for a new transformer station to help with the significant demand load that we'll be seeing as the growth of Innisfil and Southbury continues. This chart here shows a summary of the major projects, the ones that have been completed and ones that are ongoing. You see our trucks out there all over the place, and this is some of the major works that we're doing to help with reliability as well as the system access for the development that's coming down the line. One of the big things that we needed to do was improve our stations. Our stations were built a number of years ago, and we have to rehabilitate them as time goes on. Stations are good for typically 40 to 50 years, and once they reach that point, you have to look at rehabilitating, look at the transformers, and make sure that we have the transformation available to meet the demand of our customers. These are some of the lines that we're rebuilding. So on Lockhart, the road rebuild, we were out there, and on 6th Line, rebuilding some of our distribution. One of the areas that we use is infrared cameras to dictate what areas do we need to concentrate on. So we take a picture of different devices within our distribution system, and from that it highlights areas that we could have potential problems. In this case here, we did have a potential problem here. We had a burn off. If you look at the picture, the infrared image, it showed the bright red zone. That showed exactly where the fault was occurring. And this gives us an opportunity to address any maintenance concerns and be proactive in regards to doing proper maintenance on our system to ensure that we address it prior to it happening. Pad mount inspection, so for the underground subdivisions, again, with an older system, you have to maintain these systems. What we're going in is redoing underground cabling where required and changing out transformers where required as well. Some of the other challenges now that we've cleaned up our outages that we can control, now our poles are becoming targets for vehicular traffic. It's out of our control, but it does impact our customers at the end of the day. So that's one of the things that we're finding is that we're having multiple vehicle accidents throughout the territory. And when that does happen, it does impact the customers. But again, it's out of our control, but we still have to respond to them. Key accomplishments, again, on the engineering and operations side, again, is operational efficiencies through paperless work processing. On the finance side, we're using a tool that's known as Profix. Again, tying all of our work orders, all of our budgeting, our forecasting into one software, so it becomes seamless when we're working through our budgets and keeping track of the jobs moving forward. As we reported before, the CDM program has now seen its life. It's now being taken over by the Independent Electricity System Operator. We do have some residual that we're still working on. These are the two on the residential and commercial side. We're always there to assist the customers if they have any questions. We cannot at this time offer any assistance to them without going through the IESO, so we refer them to the IESO to make sure that they get served in any requirements that they're looking for. Another program is the AffordAbility Fund, Trust Fund. That's the eligibility and the incentives that are available to customers Basically, those that are based on household income as well as what their average electricity bill is and their ability to pay the bill. So it's an opportunity for people that are struggling with their bills, have high bills, that there's opportunities for them to get some incentives to help them convert some of their appliances or lighting within their residential homes. And the Ontario Electricity Support Program is still available for those that are based on household income. This graph shows the operating expenses, administration, operations, maintenance, and billing and collecting for InPower. Revenues are, the majority is from electricity sales. The distribution revenue is the next pie, and then other revenues that we collect. Highly capital-intensive program at InPower. System access, the development community drives a lot of our work. System renewal is our maintenance programs, and we make sure that we don't forget about our maintenance while we're doing the development side of the business, because at the end of the day, the renewal is the one that keeps the lights on a consistent basis. Capital funding sources, so contributions from others, capital contributions and borrowings. Capital contribution is through an economic evaluation that we use with the development community, where they pay a portion of the costs of installing new systems, so growth paying for growth. That's what I have for InPower. Any questions?
Questions? Councillor Ices.
Thank you, Your Worship. Not a question, just a comment. I know on the farm we rely on power all day long, and when we see a storm coming and whatnot, we get our tractor run generator. We get it all ready to hook up to the pole, and I have definitely noticed we haven't had to use it very often. So I guess I would just commend you on the work that you are doing to give us reliable and consistent power in the town of Innisfil. So thank you.
Thank you very much.
Councillor Waters.
Just a quick question on the energy advisor. Who do we use? Do we use a private company or do we use a nonprofit?
Through the American, I didn't hear the first part.
The energy advisor, which you had mentioned we use, do we use a private company for those, or do we have someone in-house, or do we use a nonprofit?
So we had on the energy side, we went through an organization that there's 13 cooperatives that work together. They hired a energy person that would go out to the field. With the cancellation of that program, we also had 2 staff members within InPower that would assist customers in that regard. With the cancellation, we're no longer have those staff members in those positions. We were able to absorb them within positions that were vacated. But right now, it's all being handled through the IESO. So anybody that needs any energy advice in regards to coming out, you would have to go through the IESO now.
Other questions? Councillor Asadi.
Thank you for the wonderful presentation and the updates. 2 questions I have. One on the poles and the accidents that are unpreventable. With Innisfil Beach Road and the works that are going there west of the railroad tracks, I don't remember if the poles are remaining or there's a portion where the hydro is going to be wired under, because that seems to be an area every winter where we have a lot of motor vehicle accidents. If you comment on that one, and then I'll have a question on your new rates literature.
Yeah, through the mayor, the pole line section will be relocated as part of the Innisfil Beach Road. The cost to put that line underground is substantial. It's very cost prohibitive. So with the road right away and the new location of the poles, hopefully that will help with those types of accidents that happen in the wintertime.
Thank you. And then it was interesting to see on the new rates as of November 1st for the peak, mid-peak, and off-peak. And I have one of those magnetic ones that I refer to, and I check it for November as to the, the time. But I don't remember seeing those rates in, and I wonder, was that in the literature? And if not, will those cents with the mid and peaks, because when you see the difference in the cents, it really is an eye-opener to, I was tempted to start my load of laundry before a certain time, but I'm not going to because there's too much of a cost difference.
Yeah, through the mayor, the commodity, and as it changes between spring and fall, the difference of times and the difference in pricing, will always be as far as the brochure is concerned, so that the customer is aware that during what time period the lowest price for the commodity charge is, and at what cost it would be. So that would be part of the brochure that we would move forward.
So just clarification, so where it states 10.1 off-peak, 14.4 mid-peak, 20.8 on-peak, so is that on those magnetic ones so that it's good for the homeowners to see?
Yeah, when we issue new ones, they would have it on there. The old ones, the Ontario Energy Board has slightly changed the numbers over the past couple years, but this is a significant change from the philosophy of the provincial government in the past. So we'll have to come up with new magnets for the residents. It makes it tough because we're not sure if this is going to be a continuation with the government and how many do you make, because they will change every spring and fall. So we try to rely on the brochures and the inserts for the customers as well as on the website.
Thank you, Mr. Malcolm. Councillor Waters.
Just continuing on those rate increases, without the subsidy, what would the rate increases been in terms of like 25% increase?
Off the top of my head, I believe it was close to 32%.
That's what I calculated, was over 30%. So the rebate, do we have any idea of how long that rebate's going to stick around, or is that something they're going to phase out over time?
No indication yet from the provincial government what their plan is. I think they're still looking at, during the election, they promised, I believe, a 12% reduction on the electricity component of everyone's bill. This is the start to, one, get the customer familiar with the true cost of it, and two, I still think they're working out how are they going to implement the 12%, as well as how do they ease this into the mainstream for all customers. The electricity portfolio is a very touchy subject politically, so I think they're treading water right now. So there's no indication from the ministry, the provincial government, or from our association that we belong to as to what the next step will be. So we know that for the next year, this is what it's going to be. What it looks like next year, we're not sure.
I think it's fair to say, Mr. Malcolm, the bottom line, people or politicians, the provincial government thinks that it's better to use provincial tax dollars to lower hydro bills. It seems to be what people want.
Yeah, try to spread it out among a greater population base. Yeah.
Thank you. Anyone else on the InPower file? Mr. Rayner.
Thank you very much, Your Worship, and I apologize for coming in a few minutes late. I may have missed it, but I just wanted to take this opportunity to congratulate Mr. Glenn McAllister on his confirmation as Chief Financial Officer for Empower. He's been doing an excellent job as the interim, and finally decided that we should probably give him the job. So thank you very much to Glenn and his team on the finance side. They've led us through the cost of service process, and we're very pleased, and the board confirmed his appointment very recently. Thank you, Worship.
Thank you, Mr. Rayner, and just wanted to acknowledge all of the team that's come out here tonight from Empower, appreciate, and InnServices, appreciate you being here. Did you want to go ahead then with the enterprises?
We could start with InnServices.
Okay, InnServices works.
Get the two big ones out of the way first. HR staffing, so the full-time and part-time staff, permanent 29 staff at InnServices and 3 temporary, which is our co-op students. Staffing again, very busy in regards to open positions. We took our senior compliance regulatory officer and turned it into a manager of risk, safety, and compliance. Managing risk, managing health and safety, and managing compliance is a key component for our utility. So we decided to move to a manager position for that, and it's paying off huge dividends for our organization. A number of other ones that we've had is utility infrastructure technologist, making sure that we maintain our distribution system as opposed to just the plants. We need to maintain the pipes in the ground, these new positions are there to assist in that regard. Some of the programming that we're working on is new onboarding program with new staff, doing a employee orientation for new staff, interactive sessions with handbooks, an ambassador program. An ambassador program is simply when a new employee starts on, they're teamed up with a mentor to help them through the weaving of the organization and help them get up to speed as quickly as possible, answer any questions that they may have. Not myself today. Mental health is a big issue in today's society, and we need to address that as well. And we're moving to a learning management system, looking at Q1 of next year. On the training side, to ensure that the certifications of our operators are being met, they go through a number of different training programs. These are the ones that we completed in 2019 to date. Our systems at InnServices for the water treatment, it's deemed a Class 3, and for the supply, it's a Class 3 as well. What we wanted to show you is the operators and where they are within the class systems, to show you that as new technicians come on board, they start off as an OIT and they move their way up to Class 3 to make sure that we have fully qualified individuals running our treatment plant. Same on the wastewater side, we're a Class 3 on the treatment side, and the collection side, we're classified as a Class 2. All the operators on the collection side over-exceed the Class 2 requirement that we have, and we have one operator that will be moving to a Class 3 that's remaining on the wastewater treatment side. A lot of policy updates with a new company being in for the past 3 years. It's time to take a look at our own policies and take a look at ensuring through the One Town, One Team that we have coordination between the Town of Innisfil, InnPower, and InnServices to make sure that we're all working off the same sort of policies and requirements at work. For health and safety, looked at our health and safety policy was approved for this year. We have monthly health and safety meetings, looked at new PPE, new for closed quarters, replacing all our SCBAs, and looking at making sure our health and safety inspections are being completed on time. Two major conservation programs that have been available in Innisfil has been the toilet replacement program and the rain barrels. These two programs have reached their normal course of life. Anybody that had an old flush toilet has replaced it. All new homes, it's automatic that they would have these low flush toilets. Rain barrels, still a pickup, but it's slowed down a lot because Innisfil has been a really great early adopter in conservation. So at the beginning of this program, a lot of rain barrels were sold and purchased by our residents, but now they're there and people are using them successfully. So that program too is slowly winding down. Compliance on the water side, we can say that we meet all requirements as per the Ministry of Environment. The Lakeshore wastewater system meets all compliances, as well as the Cookstown wastewater system meets our compliance with the MOECP. Some of the operational optimization that we're working on is to make sure that we flush and maintain adequate chlorine levels, improve the water quality and the aesthetics. So we go through an area and flush the area through social media and through contact with our customers. We're advising them as to when and where we're doing these types of works. So it keeps them up to date so that they understand why and what we're doing. And it also helps them that after we're flushing, that if they see sediment within their taps, to flush the water from their taps for a bit to clear any sediment that may be in that. But the perception from the public is they really appreciate the notices, and they appreciate that we are doing this to be proactive on our preventative maintenance. Other projects is looking at the Cookstown water tower. We had to clean the panels, clarify our rehabs we had to work on, raw water intake structure inspections we had to complete, fire hydrant maintenance to make sure that when the fire department does hook up, that they do have water available to fight any fires, and doing our normal pump inspections throughout our distribution system. Some of the key accomplishments on the operations side is the Churchill Reservoir upgrade. Goldcrest and Stroud recirculation system, and some pump station and installation of cisterns. One area is the Listec product. We had our first application in the farm community here in Innisfil. It went successfully. The farmer locally was very pleased with the process. Kudos to Councillor Ices. We met with him and representatives from the farming community to go over the Listec program. And the response that we had from the farm communities, they really appreciated the opportunity to use a local product here in Innisfil on the lands that they provide food on our table. Customer experience, always looking at making sure that there's any concerns that we advise the customers up front. Again, social media and the websites is a key component of what we do. The social media, as you can see, is increased by 25% through Twitter, and our Facebook has gone up by 382%. So again, it shows the level of interest by the residents and the impact that these social media platforms are providing InnServices to get the message out to our customers. InnServices customer growth is still steady growth as new customers come online. Wastewater customers also increasing over from last year to this year. On dollars part of it, the wastewater treatment and the water treatment are the bulk of our actual costs and expenditures. The revenues, the water revenue accounts for 6.9 and our wastewater revenue accounts for 5. On the revenue trend, both the water and wastewater is increasing. We're seeing, especially on the water side, with the use of water, depending on the season and how much people are watering lawns, cleaning, that will dictate how much water is going through our system. Capital expenditures on the water side and the wastewater is pretty much even. And of course, the development charges pays for the bulk of our funding sources to complete the works that we need to do. Key accomplishments on the finance side, again, the chart of accounts redesign and moving towards more of the seamless electronic version, helping with our budgeting and financial reporting to make sure that projects are going as they should be going, and we're having better tracking of the programs as we move forward month to month. Current projects. What we did this year is that we wanted to separate into the different wards so that you can get an appreciation for where the works are happening in services. So the first one is the IBR in Yonge Street that you've seen, multi-year project. The intersection is now complete. Paving was done today. The next section will be from Alcona to Yonge Street, and that will be the continuation of our water and sewer up into this campus node here. Highway 400 and IBR, another relocation of a water main for the MTO's redesign of their cloverleaf at that intersection. Stroud Wells is also underway. That's basically to make sure the condition of our existing wells and making sure that we have enough supply for the Stroud currently, as well as the future development that's planned in the near future. 6-line water and sanitary servicing. We're still working on that. Wastewater treatment plant expansion so that we can accommodate the new growth that's happening within Innisfil, making sure that the allocation is there so that development, when they come on stream, they have enough to be allocated to meet their needs. Spring Street to Leslie Road sanitary sewer is another project we're working on, and a pumping station number 4 upgrade. Lockhart water and sanitary servicing, and the Churchill Reservoir and Booster Pumping Station is also a project. This one here includes a $2.1 million that we received as a grant. Cookstown Wastewater Treatment Plant environmental assessment, looking at the Cookstown Wastewater Treatment Plant and seeing what we can do at that plant, what upgrades we will require to do, and we're going through that EA right now, as well as matching it up with our Lakeshore wastewater treatment plant that we're underway on design. Looking into the future, just to give you some ideas as to where we'll be, Alcona Reservoir Booster Pumping Station, IBR, Yonge Street to the 20th Side Road in conjunction with the project of the county. Environmental assessment for a number of sanitary pumping stations throughout our service territory in Ward 1. Looking at a new sewage pumping station, a new sanitary sewer on 7th line. Some of the achievements, with all the hard work that staff have done on the water treatment plant, we were recognized by a couple industries in regards to the plant and the phasing and the expansion that we did. So in 2018, we received the Ontario Provincial Public Works Association Award for Project of the Year. And this year we were awarded the Water Efficiency Award under the Public Sector and Utilities for Water Efficiency Measures. And that's from the Ontario Waterworks Association here in Ontario. So kudos to staff for the tremendous work and for the foresight of moving to new technology that will save the treatment of a lot of water into the future. And that's what I have for InnServices.
Thank you, Mr. Malcolm. Questions or comments? Councillor Waters.
Thank you, Mayor. Now that you're winding down the conservation programs, the water conservation programs around toilets and rain barrels, are there any other programs that you're contemplating down the road?
Yeah, we're in constant consultation with our municipal neighbors to see what sort of things they're working on. We're also going to go out to the community and see, what are some of the pinch points that they're seeing, any ideas that they may have that they've heard about, so that we can look at in 2021 to come up with a robust program that meets the needs of our current customers. I think by talking to our customers, understanding how they're using water will help us in determining what conservation measures we can promote for them.
Follow up, please. We had talked earlier about the whole conservation program around gray water, and that there is a Barrie company that has a certified technology which can reduce water consumption between 20 and 25%. Is there any opportunity to do a demonstration in, let's say, either an existing home or in a new development that might benefit the new mobility orbit in terms of around water conservation down there?
Yeah, definitely. That's an opportunity that we can take a look at with the mobility orbit. That's one of the things that our board asked us to look at is business opportunities, any ideas that we would have on all three companies, basically, InnPower, InnServices, and Enterprises that would take this vision and see what we can do as a utility to help move that vision forward.
Thank you. Councillor Ices.
Thank you, Your Worship. Water is something we often definitely take for granted, and when things go wrong with water, it usually hits the news. And I noticed in Tottenham there was a lot of concern, and I think it was to do with THMs. And I noticed on some of your slides you talked about striving to reduce them. Can you just give me the Cole's notes on THMs and how that's how we're dealing with that in Innisfil?
Yeah, so you have basically chlorine is added into the well systems to take care of the bacteria, but if it doesn't circulate well and with the mineral content, then THM levels go up. So what we did was we looked at what are the options available us to make sure that the chlorine is mixing with the water completely and not being sitting there on its own. So staff came up with a great idea of looking at recirculating pumps that would circulate the water through. And what we found is that it dramatically reduced the THM levels just by having the chlorine mixing better within the water system. So that's one area that we instituted in 2 places, and the THM levels have dropped down significantly compared to what it was before adding in this recirculation pump. So kudos to staff to take a look at that, determine what is the cause of the THM going up, and coming up with a solution to implement it.
Councillor Van Berkel.
Thank you, Your Worship. The treatment plant being in my ward, one of my biggest complaints is the smell that comes from that plant, and I was just wondering if there's anything we can do about that. It's It used to be just on the 6th line, but now I'm getting it from Sleeping Lion as well. And it all depends on which way the wind blows, I guess.
Yeah, so we're working with the company that we installed with the ListDeck program. That seems to be when that came online, that's when the calls started to come out. So we're looking at a number of options that are available. There's a couple other ListDeck type projects that are in the province of Ontario, so we're in constant communication with them to determine what action they have taken. So hopefully within the next month or two, we'll have a solution that we can present to the board and say this is what we need to do to address that issue. But yeah, we do recognize it. We are investigating it and seeing what part of the process that we need to look at.
Thank you. Can I just have a follow-up question? On your operators for the water plant, how often do they go on courses like your Class 3 operators? Do they go every 2 months or 3 months or?
Zahir.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Waters. And then we're going to have to wrap this up because we've got 3 minutes to do a whole company.
Thank you, Mayor. I've had 2 phone calls from residents concerning lead in drinking water systems with all the recent news reports. And so I just thought, since they might be watching tonight, that there might be an opportunity just for you to address that issue with lead in water. Thank you.
So what we find in regards to lead in water, it's the old fixtures, and typically it's the lead within their own plumbing fixtures within the house, not within the distribution system itself.
Thank you. And I'm just going to close with the same question I always ask every quarter. Spills or bypasses this quarter, Mr. Malcolm?
None at all.
We continue our impeccable record.
Yes, we do.
Thank you. And now we'll, in 30 seconds or less, do the Enterprises presentation. Thank you.
So Enterprises derived from Innisfil Energy Services. This is the new logo. As per the mayor, no cost was obtained in regards to achieving that new logo. So it was done by an internal staff member at InPower. Communication towers, the biggest one is Sandy Cove Tower that is installed. And hopefully shortly we'll have those customers that are on the Bell Cellular network will be much happier once that gets activated. So it's complete and ready to go. The new ones, Innisfil Fire Station 2, 3, and the Cookstown Wastewater Treatment Plant are the 3 proposed for 2020. Internet and town Wi-Fi services, so we're working with the town to gauge the public's interest in having Wi-Fi services within the town of Innisfil. Electric vehicle charging stations, a partnership between the town of Innisfil, County of Simcoe, and InPower. Enterprises was to look at the installation of 5 level 2 chargers. So we applied for the grant, and we'll see, once we hear back, we'll advise you whether we are successful or not. Street lighting design, as part of the One Town, One Team, the town currently uses contractors to design and install streetlights. There's an opportunity for us to do that on behalf of the town of Innisfil. Suite metering is a new type of service that will come in. Condos will be coming to Innisfil, so instead of having 1 meter at a condo, this would allow for sub-metering within the condo unit. So instead of having 1 customer, you could have potentially up to 100 or 200, depending how many units are within each of those condo units. So our customer base would increase substantially. We're looking at not only electricity, but water, gas, and thermal as well. And this is a brochure that we've been sending out to development community that are doing these types of condo installations. So far in South Barrie, we do have one of the condo developments that has accepted our proposal to do suite metering within their condo. We're looking forward to moving forward with that developer as they continue on in Barrie and any that start up in Innisfil.
Very good, Mr. Malcolm. Questions or comments? I know Councillor Waters is dying to ask about EV charger stations, but perhaps we can do that offline.
We're working on it.
All right, thank you. So seeing no more questions, I want to thank you very much for being here tonight. I want to thank so many of the Empower folks for showing up for the Santa Claus Parade. It was great to see. I want to thank you for the numbers in the reliability field. That's a big increase in reliability for Empower customers, and also to communications for the way that they do their outage information over the web. It makes it much easier to understand why you have no power when you can look on Twitter and see a giant tree over top of a hydro line. It's just the way that we convey that message. It really gets across to people, and I'm hearing lots of positive comments for that. So thank you very much. And the recommendation is that the 3 presentations be received as information. Mr. Rayner.
Thank you, Worship. I just wanted to quickly take the opportunity, in addition to thanking the leadership team of the utility companies, to thank the board of directors. We continue to have a dedicated group of directors that help provide guidance to the companies. And in particular, I wanted to thank the County of Simcoe CAO, Mark Aiken, who continues to, I think, sort of volunteer as a board member on InnServices and continue to provide that regional perspective to the company. Thank you, Worship.
Thank you. And that's moved by Councillor Fowler and seconded by Councillor Ices. All those in favor? That's carried. A mover and a seconder for the confirming bylaw for the special council meeting, Councillor Nicol and Councillor Van Berkel. All those in favor? And motion to adjourn, Councillor Nicol, Councillor Payne at 7:02 p.m. All those in favor? That is carried. So thank you. If we could, we're already 2 minutes past 8, so for those of you who have joined us online, we'll be resuming with our regular council momentarily. If you could bear with us, we're just going to take a 2-minute break while we allow people to come in and get settled. Thank you. Welcome to our council meeting for November the 27th, and thank you all for coming. Usually when we get this many people in the audience, it's because we've done something terribly wrong. So hopefully that's not the case tonight. I want to start by thanking staff and council for being here. I want to ask you all just a few housekeeping things. First of all, if you wanted to follow along with the agenda, there was some just outside the door as you came in, and also to ask that if you have an electronic device, if you could please set it to silent so it doesn't disturb us during the meeting. I need to let you know that public comments made during this meeting are both audio and video recorded, and that any of your remarks shall form part of the record. And if you want to understand more about our retention bylaw, you can speak to someone in the clerk's department. We are live streaming this evening, so I want to thank all of those who have joined us from home. We'll start the evening, as we always do, with open forum. We had no one sign up for open forum this evening, so that means we can move right into approval of the agenda. So the agenda, as was printed with a few additional items. Council, I know you don't like it when we table items, but these items on the floor tonight were items that pertain to tonight's business, and one of them is time sensitive. So we're asking for your concurrence to approve the agenda with the additional items that are listed on the screen. Could I have a mover and a seconder? Deputy Mayor Davidson and Councillor Arsati. All those in favor? That's carried. Next, is there any disclosures of interest? If anyone would like to, you can indicate now or indicate at the time when it becomes apparent to you. Seeing none, we'll move on to presentations and petitions. We have none. So we're going to start with the delegation. And we're going to invite our Director of Growth, Mr. Tim Kane, to the podium. And before he does, I just wanted to make a couple of introductions and thanks before we get started with our presentation. I just wanted to extend a thank you on behalf of Council to all of our partners for assisting with the creation of the Orbit and for joining us here for this historic night for the town of Innisfil. It's been said that it takes a village, and that is certainly the case here. It takes all of us. There is always a risk when listing people, because I'm always afraid I'm going to miss somebody, but I will apologize in advance if I do inadvertently miss you or don't see you in the audience. I didn't see our MPP Andrea Kanjan here yet. She was hoping to make it, but I do still have to thank her because she has been extremely helpful with this project, really taking up this cause and helping bring her provincial colleagues on board. She's worked very hard. To the Cortellucci family, to Mario, Peter, and Stefano, we want to say thank you for joining us on this journey. It's been a bit of a roller coaster at times, but it's been a journey. You're willing to be such a leader in our development community, and we really do appreciate that. Also to the Rizzardo family, to Sandra, Diego, Silvano, Claudio, and Nizio, who are always also leaders in our community, in the development community, and obviously playing such an important impact, particularly to Sandra and Rizzardo for the Rizzardo Health and Wellness Center. So we are internally grateful for that. Mark King Construction and Innisfil Alcona Partners, who've been with us along the way as well. We thank you for your continued support. And we're really happy to see Janice Scott and Ben Peterson from RVH that have come here to watch our presentation tonight. And again, I apologize if there's anyone that I have missed. A special thank you to members of our community who participated in our residents focus group for the Orbit. We have a few members in the audience tonight, including, I didn't see her, but Deborah McGrath, there she is. Claudia Andre Valens, Sue Bennett, and Richard Ratt. I would also like to recognize a few additional partners in this project who were unable to join us this evening. One of those, the County of Simcoe, the warden, was unable to come tonight. The Lake Simcoe Region Conservation Authority, Metrolinx, and of course, the Honorable Minister Clark, Minister of Municipal Affairs and Housing, who has been extremely helpful and a good friend to Innisfil for well over a year now. So I'll turn it over to Tim Kane now, our Director of Growth, to start off this evening's presentation.
Thank you, Your Worship, members of the council, staff, and guests. I don't want to run on with the thank yous, but I wouldn't be standing here without a lot of the staff that I see before me. So thank you to those groups and teams as well that contribute to this evening. It's a genuine pleasure to be here tonight, and as I kind of just alluded to, a proud member of the town's team to introduce the Mobility Orbit Vision. Yes, there's a bit of mystery to it, and there were no images in the staff report for good reason, and you'll see those images tonight, and certainly there'll be a lot of discussions hopefully coming out of that. Rarely do opportunities such as this one come to us and present themselves, and we're fortunate to be here in front of a council who is already known as being progressive and forward-thinking, and what better way to test that by introducing a new form of development for Innisfil. The Orbit is a way to reimagine how we transition from a rural community, which we know and love, and incredibly proud of, to a community that embraces responsible growth, catalyzed by, who would have ever thought, a rail station in the town. Growth can be a daunting prospect for many municipalities in the GTA these days, and sometimes even feared by those neighborhoods that are at the coalface of change that's happening. So how does Innisfil choose its own direction? How do we reimagine growth? And how do we do something different environmentally, culturally, socially, and economically? Tonight, Jason Rayner, Alex Joseph, and I will be introducing the Orbit Vision. You will likely hear at multiple points throughout this presentation that this is only the first step in a much longer vision and process to implement that vision. There is a much more detailed and longer process, unfortunately. We do have to get into the details at some point, but tonight is about dreaming and what we can do, and how do we set the stage for that moving forward. And the vision tonight and the mystery tonight isn't to run roughshod over planning policies or short-circuit planning approvals. It's by no means any of that. It's quite the opposite. The Orbit Vision is a responsible first step to inspire this community to grow differently and to set the stage for meaningful dialogue and establish a direction that protects what is important for this town. So hopefully this is a familiar title page. It's from our Place official plan. During the consultation for Our Place, we heard repeatedly from our residents about those things that they cherish and about those things that define this community: rural landscapes, established neighborhoods, the lake, quality open spaces, just to name a few. And through this process, the concept of placemaking was embedded, and you hear me repeat this again and again, and I'm sorry, but it is important. But where we try to marry the physical infrastructure side with the social programming side to make opportunities for our residents to connect in all aspects of their lives as they move around the town. And also during this official plan process, there was a seed planted in there quite deliberately. We knew a railway station was on the horizon for this town, and Council did make the bold step at the time to adopt densities for around a transit station that were typically only seen in the GTA, introducing those densities and policies to the County of Simcoe for the first time, knowing that it would be a placeholder to guide discussions and keep us moving forward, and not to squander away an opportunity to grow in a way that is much more sustainable. And that concept in the official plan essentially was, fairly simple: an 800-meter radius, which is the foundation for walkable communities, and a density of 150 people and jobs per hectare, which equates to a population as a minimum of about 30,000 people. So a bold step, but an important one that was established in the Our Place official plan. And then, not that long ago, this council updated the community strategic plan, and this vision statement came to light: community first, future next, balance always. And to be honest, Orbit was, percolating at about the same time, and this vision statement, was almost written for it. I can assure you that it wasn't, but it is a powerful example. The Orbit is a powerful example of what's possible by applying this vision statement that we see before you tonight, and supporting those pillars of growing, connecting, and sustaining. And those objectives in the community plan that Council supported related to managing growth, promoting jobs, identifying the town, moving people, better using infrastructure, being more fiscally and environmentally sustainable, all those objectives are worthy objectives that are being met by this vision that you're going to see tonight. And who can forget this? And no one wants to forget this. This is what we're privileged to see on a daily basis for those of us that live and work in this town. And this is an image that, you know, is held dear for our identity and one that we want to keep. And at a time of unprecedented growth in the GTA, you may have heard me say this before too, you know, the GTA is the fastest growing area in North America at the moment. How do we preserve what's important, the scene that you see before you? How do we reimagine rural and grow differently? And how do we not see this as the next greenfield site as the town wants to expand? Similarly, you know, other things that the vision is looking to protect and maintain is protecting established neighborhoods. You know, there is uncertainty sometimes by communities and by those neighborhoods, you know, that are fearful of some form of intensification. How do we reimagine reducing the pressure on these existing neighborhoods and maintain stability and predictability for our residents? And this is us, and this should look familiar as well. Just a snapshot about our tiny part of the world, which we do have the ability to shape through the decisions that we make in this chamber. The orbit in that red circle is that 800-meter radius that I introduced earlier on the south side of Alcona, central in our north-south axis as you move through the municipality, and it's a real opportunity for growth in this municipality, and Alex is going to be talking about the context of the orbit in much more detail in his presentation. Similarly, our settlement areas shown in orange on that screen show the orbit in relation to Alcona, our primary settlement area, Lefroy, our second largest settlement area, and also importantly too, which isn't shown on that screen, well, not specifically, is the 6-line corridor out to Innisfil Heights. So, you know, draw a triangle in between those three critical growth centers of the town, and you see that the orbit is well positioned to help us leverage those opportunities. And how do we stack up? So this slide is to scale, and it shows the relative areas of Innisfil, Barrie, and Toronto. You can see the populations that are contained in a much smaller area in the case of the city of Barrie, and in a much larger area, but also a much larger population for the city of Toronto. It shows that we have a lot of growing to do, particularly as the population from the GTA moves into this community. So how will we go from rural to urban in a form that's reflective of this community and how we want to grow? And how do you build a sustainable future? There's ways not to do it. And no offense to our friends in Mississauga, I did live there for a while, but it is a very close comparator for us, and a good example of how things can change in a relatively short period of time. You know, it's one of many homogenous places that we kind of pass through but don't really have any desire to stay in sometimes. And we can't blame Mississauga for this. It was a product, and still is a product, of a market and planning approach which, you know, we are beginning to understand is flawed. You know, it's autocentric, there's lack of a social fabric, and it's a place left scrambling to retrofit places to accommodate new growth as it builds out. And this slide kind of shows the Mississauga currently, and those black areas are basically the buildings that populate Mississauga, compared to Innisfil on the left. And you know, in the 1950s, which, you know, doesn't seem that long ago unless you ask my children, but in the 1950s, you know, essentially within a generation, Mississauga looked a lot like Innisfil. You know, it had some smaller settlements along the lake. It was in relatively close proximity to Toronto, and Mississauga gradually grew outwards from those lakeside settlements into that massive form that you see on the right-hand side of that slide. And, you know, there is little identity with that new framework. There's very little reflection of municipality that it used to be, and it's a very expensive example of how to service a community moving forward. So how do we do that differently? This is a similar image that just shows the contribution. I'm trying not to bore you with details, but the orange reflects residential uses. The bluish purple represents commercial and employment purposes, and just showing that relationship of residential sprawl and commercial areas as well. That yellow area on the right for Mississauga shows their downtown center and their and they're trying to retrofit essentially what's a shopping mall into a town center, and we can appreciate that as a town trying to retrofit things like Innisfil Beach Road in our main streets. It's not easy, so how do we do it right the first time moving forward? And a couple of facts on this one. A think tank for the University of Water tried to put some cost, or they have put some cost on sprawl. The 3 times image on the left reflects that suburban residents drive 3 times more than urban drivers. And there's an economic and environmental cost to that. There's the climate change piece, there's the air quality piece, and equally important for our residents are the economics and social implications of being in your car 3 times more. And imagine using that extra time and extra money to have family dinners, engage with neighbors, go to a library program to learn a new hobby. There's tremendous social benefits and community building opportunities by not sitting in our car, and Orbit essentially wants to leverage this. The number on the right, $1.76 billion, that was a number that was calculated for the city of Halifax, so by that think tank. So if Halifax were to put half of their growth into their downtown area over a period of just over 20 years, that would be the savings for them of $1.76 billion. So those savings come from pipes, roads, parks, policing, fire, busing, transit, and governance, and that's just half the growth. So imagine more contained growth, imagine the Orbit, and imagine in Innisfil where we had extra millions of dollars a year in our operating budget to really put money into programs that make a difference for our residents. The why now piece is a quote from Star Wars a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away when many councils before us started trying to attract a rail station. And thankfully, by the hard work of this council and councils past, we were able to secure that opportunity, and we're certainly grateful for that opportunity now. At the same time, it's not just getting a rail station, it's also forging those strong relationships that Mayor Dolan indicated in that series of thank yous tonight that will actually be able to make this happen at this point in time. And we're quite proud of that, and we don't want to lose the momentum that we're building. We have a rare opportunity for a rail station. What's more rare about this station, and Metrolinx admits it as well, is that it's a blank canvas. I think many of you have heard me say that before, that this is a chance to really not retrofit a rail station into an existing neighborhood, but create a whole new community and neighborhood around that, and an opportunity to reimagine community building. Innisfil is innovative, but we can't rest on our coattails and rely on our reputation. We shouldn't accept status quo, particularly for those parts of development that we see happening around us that we know we don't like. We have a chance to do it differently. The RFP process that we issued earlier this year for Alex's team, who was ultimately successful, wasn't a typical request. It focused on the outcome of the Orbit and what it could be. It didn't worry about the hows or the whens or even the whys. It was about what is possible, and that was a question that we posed to Partisans, and Partisans is going to be presenting that tonight. And Partisans is known for challenging the status quo, and that was very purposeful in selecting them in this process. I actually recall quite vividly Alex in the interview process asking if we were beeping serious about doing this, and because if he wasn't serious, he wasn't interested in doing the project. So we had to convince Alex that, yeah, we are serious by focusing on what's possible, and we need something to build on and aspire to, and thankfully, Alex and his team brought us here tonight. So council is being asked tonight to take the first of many steps with the Orbit vision. This isn't the last step by any means. You will probably be tired of seeing myself and team members up here going through those next steps. But this is the logical first step in this process. We've already made some inklings and preparations and planting seeds in the community strategic plan and in the official plan, and this is the next stop in that journey. The adoption of the vision represents the beginning of that much longer planning, policy, and public engagement process. OPIP, as it's referred to in the staff report, being the Orbit Potential and Innovation Plan, will be essentially a secondary plan on steroids. It's going to look at many things that we want to achieve and do differently in this Orbit. And there'll be many opportunities for council and the public to engage in that process, and we look forward to that genuinely. The reason for adopting a vision early in this process is to provide guidance and a starting point for the long-term implementation and those meaningful conversations with the community. Given the complexities and number of moving pieces with the stakeholders in a project this size, we are trying to establish a direction sooner rather than later so that we can construct the rail station in 2022. Also, too, it's important to note that where we have had clear direction before, and where we have really made a point of directing our resources here at the town, I'm looking over at my teammates right now as I say this, is that the Rosardo Health and Wellness Center sprang out of that ground much more quickly than all of us ever thought. So, why not continue to build on those successes for the benefit of our community? And we certainly see this as one of those potentials. So I'm almost done. Some of the key foundations and pillars for Alex's team when they were coming up with the vision was mobility. Obviously, Metrolinx plays a part in that, and thank you to them and providing the opportunity for the train to stop in Innisfil at some point. But how do we take that a step further as well? It's not just about that one rail stop. It's going to be about integrating Innisfil Transit, having concepts of light rail in this community, which we've never seen before, potentially drones, and maybe even underground service corridors. So how do we marry all those mobility pieces together into the vision that you're about to see? The wellness piece, I've already made reference to the Rosardo Health and Wellness Center. How do we embed other health facilities and centers like that in the community? How do we let people live without having to be in a car all the time? And how do we supply healthy food and have programs that literally make us feel better? The agricultural piece, probably one of the main pillars and genesis of the orbit to keep our breadbasket moving forward, and to maybe even subscribe to principles of no net agricultural loss. We certainly do that on an environmental basis. Why can't we try to offset our agricultural loss as we grow and develop, and even having smaller scale operations in the orbit itself, which you may see tonight. The innovation piece, I've mentioned briefly, connected to the smart city piece as well. Again, we can't rest on our reputation to better deliver town services. How do we lead data governance and use technology to better address the challenges that we face? The orbit doesn't necessarily have to be this big, bold, brand new idea. Don't shoot me, Alex. There's no question that it is. But at the same time, it's a melting pot of all those things that are happening globally now, which are much easier to tap into and share with, and pick out those pieces that work for building new communities and put them into a melting pot that we're going to call the mobility orbit. And there are better ways of doing things, and there's better ways that we don't know yet. And certainly what we want to do is create the proving ground in the space for those things to happen so that it can be replicated to make us a better town and a more efficient town. With respect to the shoreline and the beach, we can't forget our most important community asset. Growing up and not out, with sustainability and passive measures top of mind, is going to help the lake and our climate. Certainly best water, stormwater management over a smaller precedent is going to create a powerful precedent in the watershed. So we look forward to doing better and growing smarter in proximity into Lake Simcoe. So that concludes my piece of the presentation tonight. With the background in mind, I'm going to ask Alex to walk you through this project in more detail and let you see the rest. Thank you.
Your Worship and members of council, as well as residents of Innisfil and guests. I'm really excited to be here tonight. This is probably one of the most interesting, really whimsical projects I've ever had the chance to work on, and I'm really just proud to be here tonight. And so, here's the clicker. Here we go. What is an orbit? Tim's a hard act to follow, so I'm going to try and he's like a dark horse. He comes up with this great speech, and I've got to kind of fill in his shoes here. So the orbit is a new way of thinking about city building. The orbit is this idea that the train station is going to create this center of gravity around this new community that can grow around it, but a complete community. A community that has everything from advanced manufacturing, incubator spaces, residential scales of all types. It's got the plumbing. What I discovered along the way here, that plumbing is important. Services are important. It's not just about pretty buildings. And we went through one of the most inspiring processes working with not only the stakeholders, from the quartiles all the way through to focus groups, but also, building code. It was really an inspiring group of people. And I think Innisfil's lucky to have the team that you have. It's progressive, young, and they work really hard. So This is our vision for what an orbit is. It's the station at the middle and this incredible community that comes around it. Could there be a hospital? I want there to be one. I want there to be retail. I want there to be a market. I want there to be culture. A train station doesn't just have to be a drab concrete platform in the middle of nowhere. It can be so much more, and you're about to be, I would say, the pioneers in how things should have been done for a long time in Ontario, but weren't. Why? We don't need to worry about that anymore. So this is Innisfil, and there's this idea of the orbit being a kind of consolidator, a place where the community can come together and prevent sprawl. So if you look right there, you've got all these incredible communities from Stroud to Sandy Cove, Friday Harbor, Alcona, Lefroy, and then the orbit is this incredible center of gravity that I think is going to consolidate. It's going to bring you together. It's going to make it easy to go to Toronto. It's going to make it easier to go to Barrie. It's going to be a place where people who have felt there isn't an alternative to either urban or really suburban experiences can have something new, and it's the city of the future. How do you invent the city of the future? Well, you don't. It's already been done. And what's so beautiful is that our process involved precedents, and the precedents start in Moshav cities in Israel, which I think is really important because it's all about agrarian roots and respecting that and building these incredible concentric circle cities that are self-sustaining. And in a world that we know is suffering from the onslaught of climate change, you're positioned to do things right. And hopefully we can be part of that. About 150 years ago, this guy named Ebenezer Howard came up with the Garden City idea. It's this sort of utopic precedent for city building. And you can see these things sprouting up all over the world in terms of precedents. This is Masdar City in UAE, and on the right side, Europa City outside of Paris. We've chosen these two as well because they're rural. They're literally just fields. Just like the orbit's located in a field now, so are these. And they're actually building them. And you have the chance to build this too. Paris was just an idea in the beginning 2,000 years ago. Burning Man was just an idea 25 years ago. But it's become the precedent for what's being seen as the most viable way for people to really get around. People like circles, they don't like grids. We love to go on diagonals. If you look at a park, there's diagonals everywhere. And this kind of idea of concentric circles and being in a circle versus a square or a grid is really important to our study. But so is the fundamental reality of that we're building in a community that's low density. There are examples all over the world, successful examples of incredible developments on the outskirts of cities and in rural contexts where density and low density exist in a cohesive, harmonious way. In fact, they're celebrated. These are some of the most celebrated pieces of architecture in the world and some of the most convivial communities in the world. So how do we get there? We've got the dense urban grid that the Romans gave us. We've got the spaghetti plan that I think probably our grandparents gave us. For better or worse, this is what we have with some sort of medieval in-between as well. But there's also this other thing. This is the concentric circle plan, which is the Moshav city. It's also Burning Man. It's a number of different cities that have done this before, but we're saying, what's next? We want to innovate for you guys. And I think that it's important to see why we're here today. We've got the circle plan, we've got the square plan, we've got the concentric circle idea. Why not make a squircle? Why? Because we've got the provincial concessions that Simcoe gave us about 200 years ago, and we have this idea of an orbit. And so we've come up with this idea of the squircle plan, the best of both worlds. So how do we get there? We have the concessions, we have Side Road 20, we've got the 6th line, we've got the shoreline, we've got the spaghetti plan, we've got a little bit of grid down on the right in Lefroy, and then a field. You start to draw those lines out, we take them out, and we create a kind of container on the edge. So we're no longer a circle, we're a series of squircles. And then there could be future nodes along the tracks in the middle. Let me know if I'm going too fast. Okay, I'm going to keep on going this fast. What's most important in this context is the sensitivity to the environment. There's wetlands, there's fields, there's train tracks. There's real context here that we've taken into account and actually taken as a kind of example for how to do things differently. We can do a whole series of secondary pedestrian as well as bike paths, but what do we do with density? This is how Toronto deals with it. Somehow, someone, I don't know who, said that we should look, because I'm from Toronto, we should look like a circus tent. I don't think it really looks like that, but that's the idea. We've come up with a bit of a different take on this. Density has to start in a place and then, I think, ripple out. And so what we've talked about here is a ripple. So start with density near the train and the station, and then let it sort of fade out, and do it in a natural way. The station will be at the center of this. I'm kind of teasing you because I'm so excited about the final images here. So this train station's in the middle. We've got the tracks, it goes through the entire township, but it's sort of like the elephant in the room. What do we do with this bridge? How do we take advantage of it? And how do we create a connected community? Because most of the time, these situations are quite difficult to solve from a kind of physical perspective. So we went back to precedents, and we said, well, there's so many cities in the world that have great bridges, and they're activated. And so we have the Ponte Vecchio as a kind of idea for how to bridge with programming. So why reinvent the wheel when we can just import something we all love so much? And in a way that the GO train is like a steel river, okay? And so the station can be part of a connector bridge that isn't actually devoid of activity. It can be the center. It can be the connector. There's other examples from Italy that I'm also fond of. So here is a kind of in-depth description of how the logic for this works. The typical Metrolinx plan for a station involves building a building about 200 meters, 150 meters north of a main thoroughfare, and creating an underground pathway to another platform on the other side of the tracks with a giant, huge parking lot. We said, let's not do that like this. Let's rethink this. So we push the station towards towards the street and make it part of larger developments. Other cities, such as Tokyo, have been doing this for 50 years. These are sketches, so these are visions. They're not the actual design, but they're more like what could be. And so the station becomes embedded in larger developments. These could be cultural, they could be market, they could be incubator and office spaces with residential dwellings above. They can be really part of something special and not a kind of separate sort of drab thing beside the road. I don't want to talk about other examples in places in Ontario because it's everywhere. And this is what it could look like. So, the park. Right now, Metrolinx mandates a certain setback from the train tracks. And we think this is a really potent moment in the community to take something that's normally seen as, I would say, ground that you're not supposed to use, and say, no, we can embrace this and turn it into something special. So the green, we call this the park. The rail lines becomes our version of, say, a high line. It's this green connector that takes you from the south, which is the wetlands, which we preserve, and connect it to the north, and actually have a kind of secondary pathway along this. It could look like this. So we turn what's normally something we turn our backs to into an asset. And obviously, by that point, Metrolinx is going to be electrified, right? So this is what the orbit looks like rendered. Am I going too fast? And that's what it could look like at the street. And I think that what these images are trying to communicate to you is that the possibilities for the future in Innisfil are bright, they're green, they're sustainable, and they're connected. And this is this, I would say, spark to an amazing new future for Innisfil. And I hope that you've enjoyed and appreciate the vision. Thank you.
Thank you, Your Worship, members of council. I'm pleased to provide the cleanup on this one and provide a few more details. But first, I just want to apologize to the people who are here to talk about a very long-awaited project called the South Innisfil Creek Drain. We will get to you. I apologize. You've been waiting at least 10 years. I think Mr. Cortellucci's been waiting about 40 years for this presentation, so bear with us. We're nearly there. So I just want to talk very briefly about the phasing of this project. You know, the aspirations of this vision are significant and will take a significant amount of time to realize if we're all rowing in the right direction. But to look at the first phase, so what's realistic in the very near term? Well, the GO train station is, as Mr. Kane spoke to earlier, you know, we're very much hopeful with our partners' assistance that we will see trains stopping in Innisfil as close to 2022 as possible, which then also provides the impetus for a fairly high density, if not mid-rise density block that currently already exists in Sleeping Lion Subdivision Plan Phase 5, which is on the northeast corner of that quadrant that we're talking about activating. That will see several thousand people there within the next few years, if everything goes well. The 400-meter radius is what we're focusing in on in the immediate term. That will require planning policies and a number of other policies in place. But we are, as I hope you can see, very much trying to future-proof the concept of the 800 meters. So the last thing we want to do is do something, spend a lot of money, and then find out 10 years from now, I don't know, the pipe isn't big enough or something like that. That's never happened in this community. So we're very much trying to avoid that. To do that, of course, we need alignment. And you know, I'm not superstitious, but I would suggest to you that the stars have aligned on this project from all of our provincial, county partners, a number of ministries. We've already talked to you a little bit about the partners, but I'm going to go into that a little bit more detail. And I'm reminded of the quote, you know, the harder you work, the luckier you get. And I think that's very much what this project has demonstrated. Although this is the reveal to the community, a number of people, including our residents, have been involved with this project. The stakeholder group, made up of landowners and a number of others who represent the landowners in this area, and here's a few of the parties, have in fact been involved meeting almost every other week for many, many months to get to the vision alignment that you see before you today. And I think the stars are aligned because I think if we had 60 or 70 landowners in this vicinity of the orbit, it would have taken years to get to this stage. So I think it's quite wonderful that we've been able to get alignment with our partners within a short period of time. Members of council received on desk tonight, as Her Worship noted, a letter from Minister Clark from the Ministry of Municipal Affairs and Housing. And I can tell you that it's not a regular occurrence to receive a letter from the minister directly speaking to the orbit and specifically indicating that the tools that are at his disposal at the provincial level may be necessary to move this project along as quickly as this vision imagines. So we're very pleased and thankful to the minister for taking time out of his day to provide us with that letter. There's also been a number of support letters from the stakeholders that you have on desk as well, and they've been instrumental, the stakeholders, in creating this vision. But I want to take a moment, and this will embarrass them, of course, so nobody look. But I want to take a moment to talk a little bit about the Cortell family. Their collective track record, commitment, generosity, and enthusiasm for thinking outside the box should provide council, I think, and the community with the confidence that their support for this vision means that it actually will happen. And not in Mario's grandchildren's lifetime, but in his. There is no doubt that without the Cortell group supporting this vision, agreeing to build the GO train station, in an accelerated timeline, we would not be here before you today. So your third letter on desk is from Peter Cordelucci of the Cortel Group, confirming the history that they have in this community, their commitment to the long-term vision of Innisfil, as well as, I would note, their significant experience in building in transit hubs, including Vaughan, which I think is critical for success in this project at the pace that we intend to move. Our residents, of course, certainly not least but last in this presentation, have dedicated their time and their hours in the evening to come together to look at this vision, to look at draft versions, to give feedback to the Partisans Group and to our staff, which has been critical and incorporated into this final draft that you see before you tonight, members of council. And I want to thank them very much for giving of their time and for being very willing to be critical. You know, we knew we would not get it right on the first cut, despite Alex's good work and Tricia's, but with this refinement, I think we're very proud and pleased to present you with the vision tonight. So we have heard from those residents that were involved in that focus group, and we appreciate their feedback. We expect to hear much, much more from the community, particularly as we begin in earnest the design for the GO Train station. What is it that we want to see in that station, in that space, in that area? What kind of green space, what kind of market space makes sense to be the nucleus, the gravity pull for that community? And so before I play a video so you can hear directly from our residents, I just want to close with a quote from Mr. Warren Buffett, who said, "Someone is sitting in the shade today because someone planted a tree a long time ago." And I think Mr. Warren Buffett has a unique perspective on growth, not only of his own personal bank account, but his work in the United States and his philanthropic work. And I do hope that what you're doing tonight, Council, and what the community is potentially endorsing tonight does plant those seeds so that the shade will be here for Innisfilians many, many generations to come. Your Worship, after the video, we'd be happy to take questions.
I came to Innisfil about 25 years ago. The thing that drew me to Innisfil was the affordable house prices and the beautiful, beautiful setting. I'm one of the commuters that lives in Lefroy and drives down to the city every day for work.
My wife and I have been here for about 5.5 years. We really enjoy Innisfil, and I think this is where we intend on raising a family. I think that this concept of the orbit actually breaks from what is traditionally the habit of municipalities, is just to develop subdivisions as, you know, status quo. The idea of having a planned neighborhood where you have that density that's going to create communities and utilize public space is actually really exciting.
I moved here approximately 7 years ago with my family, and we've enjoyed living here. We don't want that feeling to disappear with new development, but we also know that development brought us here, so how do we envision development so it doesn't take away from the current community feel? The plan presented by the Orbit, I like it a lot because it's giving us a vision of how the town should grow, accommodating the planned growth, but also not losing our identity.
My wife and I moved to Innisfil in 2008 when we retired. We came up here to be closer to our 2 daughters and our grandsons. We love the surrounding area, the farmland, the countryside, the proximity to the lake. But once we got here, what amazed us was the spirit of the community. We have such great facilities in our town. The Idea Lab, the Rec Center, the Stroud and Lefroy arenas, and the Rizzardo Center. And so one of the important things in this development would be trying to have our existing communities feel connected to the new development, and likewise that new development with its higher density feel like it has some connection to the rest of the community.
I'm quite proud to say that I live in Innisfil, because I think already if you look at the Uber with the transit, the way the library's been developed, it's already a very forward-thinking community. And so as long as we can stick to that, I think that this is going to be a neat place to live.
The idea of the orbit is great because it's being a proactive plan versus a reactive plan.
We can see what's happened in the GTA with those municipalities who just got swallowed up and became just commuter towns. Where in Innisfil, we have the heritage of the farms and the waterfront. We can really plan ahead and make it something that's not just a commuter town.
My first thought was it was kind of breaking the mold of the cookie cutter idea of suburban development.
The thought of that hub kind of developing there makes sense to me in terms of it gives us a connection on the goal line to get down to the City of Toronto, makes it fast and more effective. By having those multi-stories and making it commuter friendly, we eliminate the traffic getting into the old parts of Wacona.
It also provides more affordable housing in a concentrated area that's close to transit.
This idea gives us a chance to deal with the population growth that's coming and at the same time preserve the natural lands around us.
We can also benefit from having the density of population that will help bring in commercial development, stores, transportation, culture. It's a beautiful melding of both worlds.
Let's make a plan to preserve our environment, work with the environment.
Allocate space for living and allocate space for the resources that allow us to live.
We make a better connecting route by the orbit plan. We're not sprawling as much.
And if we can pull it off and have neighborhoods that work and interact and still keep our countryside, that's worth the effort.
Innisfil has an opportunity to be really pushing the envelope, not only on design, but also utilizing the technology to really build this thing right, where people can look from around the world even and say, wow, they had the forethought.
Let's be a world leader. We have the ability to do it here, so let's do it.
We have an amazing opportunity to do it right and for the benefit of generations.
So, Your Worship, members of council, we're happy to take questions at this time on the delegation, and I believe the staff reports are also on the agenda tonight.
Thank you very much to the entire team that put this presentation together, and to the people. Those weren't actors; those are our residents that were on that video. So that was really quite well done. Thank you for that. So, Council, just before we go to questions, I'm going to ask for your concurrence in order to move this along as quickly as possible so we can get to the South Innisfil Creek Drain sometime this evening. There's a number of items. So first of all, the delegation 6.1 that we're dealing with now. But if you would allow us to also move forward staff report, C1, which is the vision, and C2, which was the mobility orbit agreement. And we could deal with all three of those items now together. Could I have concurrence for that? Seeing none? All right. Then I will start by opening the floor for questions and comments. Councillor Waters.
Thank you, Your Worship. As I've expressed many times, I think this is a great opportunity to demonstrate not only to other communities in Ontario and Canada, but also worldwide. This is an opportunity to really put our thumbprint on what can be. And coming from that background, I know what the possibilities are, and so I'm very, very excited. I'm glad to be a first-term councillor and having this one of my major projects on here that we can all deal with. And I think I can speak for many of us that we think this is a great project, and we thank for all the partnerships with the Cortel Group and the architects that we've chosen and the planners we've chosen. So I think it's a great opportunity. However, I'm going to throw a however in there. Is that a plan without targets is just a plan, and it can quickly fall apart. So I'm hoping that at some point in time, I don't think it's tonight in terms of asking what the targets are, but at some point in time, it would be nice to be able to have targets that we can shoot for and that we know whether or not we've been successful at achieving. We can in the end, we can have a bunch of nice concentric circles on the grounds, but the buildings themselves and the communities just aren't achieved. So we need metrics to allow us to basically evaluate it at the end or in the process that we're on the right track. So I would like an opportunity at some point in time to be able to know what those hard targets are going to be. And knowing my interest in passive house and high efficiency buildings and that kind of stuff, it would really be nice to be able to see that somewhere in writing that we all agree to. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Van Berkel.
Thank you, Your Worship. In many years that I've sat on council, I've seen a lot of stuff happen, and so have you in the town of Innisfil, from the sewers when they went in under Mayor Andre and water under Mayor Fisher. Our rec complex and our police amalgamations under Mayor Fisher, libraries, fire halls, Friday Harbor, the Rizzardo Wellness Center. All of these things were done, and none of them were done without criticism and opposition, but they were done with a vision that brought us here today. And I am extremely proud that I'm on council one more time to see this vision become a reality, because this is probably something that's going to take 25, 30, maybe even 40 years to fulfill. And it is the future of Innisfil. And I'm extremely proud of our staff who had this vision, all of our developers and our partners that had this vision to make it a reality to where it's now that it came here. And I'm proud of our council, and I'm proud to serve under you, that you've endorsed it as well, Mayor. And I can't wait to get this going. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Van Berkel. Deputy Mayor Davidson.
Thank you, Your Worship. I think I concur with Councillor Alex Waters as an environmentalist and believing in our future to keep Innisfil, our rural, our water, our greening areas. Keeping that intact as we grow is very important to me. I've been a strong speaker against certain development that is just urban sprawl or doesn't work with the community's needs. I'm very much against that kind of development. But I will say I have worked with the Cortellucci Group in the last 12 years that I was in council, 8 years in council, 4 years off, now back, that they have a vision that goes beyond our term. We're not worrying so much about what's happening with this term of council. We really would like to look at the 20 to 30 year window and say, we left this behind for you. I don't have kids, but I'm telling you, your kids have the same right to have animals walk through their backyards, to see a moose or a deer walk through your garden, which happens to me on a regular basis. But you have that right for your kids. So if we can leave something better for your generation down the road, I think we're doing what you hired us to do. So I hope we have some targets set. I also want to know more about the Smart Mile, which I know Peter's involved in, which is a new technology that is actually being proposed for that particular area, which is something new for your younger generation. So I will push hard for this to move forward with target dates, if we can get those, and at the same time use the latest green technology, and even that includes solar windows, passive roofs. I think this is the smart direction to go, and hopefully we do get a hospital in this area as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Councillor Ices.
Thank you, Your Worship. It is very interesting to me that the very first slide that that Mr. Kane put up had the title "Rural Reimagined." So I look at myself as a rural resident of Innisfil, and I'm also a farmer, which gives me another perspective on it. And it's really hard to see what we're doing currently with how we develop things to have the rural and the urban together. So I'm very excited to reimagine rural and to be able to protect farmland for the future, and to really be a part of that. So I'm very excited to see this reimagining of rural, and reimagining Innisfil is how I see it. So thank you for all the hard work that's been done so far. Thank you to the Corlucci's for partnering with us in this venture. So,
Thank you, Councillor Arcese. Councillor Nicol.
Thank you, Worship. I'm starting to sense a theme here. First, thank you to everyone who's contributed to this project so far. To me, this truly is a council-defining legacy which will mold our community without destroying the very essence of Innisfil. We truly have the opportunity here to partner with our development community while absorbing the provincial targets in a centralized, accessible, and fully serviced area. I truly can't wait to see this come to life. Thank you.
Councillor Setti.
Thank you, Your Worship. A couple notes that I wanted to say as well. I think that this is probably one of the most important votes for council, and for all those council members that sat here before to work to get us to this point. I think it's a legacy for our town for generations to come. It's not just in the next 20 years, it's our grandchildren and future. It is quite a visionary design, and I think it takes a lot of collaboration to work with the developer in partnership. And I'm proud that the Cortel Group has stepped forward to work with us on this design, and very grateful to them for that. I'm also happy that in the report, it also states that my concern before that I had asked staff was, what opportunities do we have for our residents to learn more and to be able to speak about this? And there will be many opportunities throughout the development process for both council and the public in the process to hear more. There's, and I understand that there'll be more focus groups, open houses, and input. So it's not something that just ends here tonight, but a continual dialogue with our community. And I think that that's important. We're creating something that is not done in other communities. And I think that this, preserving what residents have said, listening to them in that video, they said it's worth the effort. It's preserving what they value and cherish the most. We value our agricultural land, our forested area. If we can concentrate this to an intensified area and create this orbit, squircle, or whatever the phrase was, I think it's a great vision, and I applaud the direction.
Other comments or questions? Councillor Payne.
I have to say something here. I just think this is a great opportunity that we have in our laps here, and we cannot let this go. It's growth for our community. It's making our community we're preserving our communities, and we're protecting our communities, and we have to go with this. And I think this is so exciting, and that we're a part of this is amazing, and I can't wait to see it, and I hope I do get to see it. Thank you.
Councillor Sadi, then Councillor Fowler.
Sorry. Thank you. There was one item that I just wanted to mention to staff that I'll be certainly interested in seeing later in this report. Was previously in council, there was through the province looking at electric rail expansion with duplicate lines. So how that space will be, how we'll work with that space and preserving some of that to allow that future growth as well.
Thank you. Councillor Fowler.
When I'm watching the video, the first thing that comes to mind is a mosaic. You have so many different pieces and people coming together. There's so much work before the shovel even gets put in the ground. And to get to this point this rapidly is amazing. It's beautiful to see all different facets of life and people from all different walks of life come together for this beautiful creation. You have something that, when most people think of intensification, they think of hard steel and cold environments. This is something that it gets a balance between the saving of the rural lands that we have, plus the green space, plus the ability to have as many people possibly together in a tight little space, but it comes out beautifully. I'm very impressed. Thank you to everybody.
Anyone else? I just want to add a few comments. So just to go back a bit, and when Mr. Rayner said about the stars aligning, I think that's really what happened, because about, I'm going to say 4 years ago, we finally got approved for a GO train station, and we were elated. We were getting a GO train station, and it was part of a package, a bundle, I think, of about 5, and they were all going to look exactly the same. And when we went to the meetings with Metrolinx and we said, yeah, but we'd really like 2 entrances. Nope, that's what you're getting. And then we said, well, really, we might want to have a market in the parking lot. Nope, that's what you're getting. All 5 stations were going to look exactly the same. But you know what? We were happy to get a station, so be it. Then the new government came into power and the direction changed, and now they were no longer funding GO train stations. We were devastated. We weren't going to get our GO train station. And then we started thinking about the possibility, because they talked about the stations being having air rights, so giving higher density to allow for those stations to be built with the development community. And that's what really was the seed that was planted, and that's when, about a year ago, we gave staff direction in the way, I want to call it, we tossed a ball to staff and said, see what you can do. Well, I think you hit it out of the park. So thank you very much for that. So having said that, I think we'll take a vote. So the first vote will be on the delegation and the recommendation. Oh, and I should have also said, when the stars aligned, it was also with a government that believes in this vision, believes in affordable housing, believes in more supply of housing, believes in putting that housing near transit stations, and is not afraid to use the tools that it has in its toolbox in order to make that happen. And we've received that letter from Mr. Clark, or sorry, Minister Clark. So the motion as is on the table, a mover, please. Deputy Mayor Davidson, and seconded by Councillor Orsatti. All those in favor? That is carried. Item 6.1, which was the staff report, which just outlines the village. Sorry, C1, not 6.1. A mover and a seconder for that report, Councillor Fowler and Councillor Ices. All those in favor? That's carried. And finally, C2, which is the staff report regarding the Mobility Orbit Agreement, and that's moved by Councillor Van Berkel and seconded by Councillor Waters. All those in favor? That's carried. So council, fasten your seatbelts because we're going into orbit. Just before we move on, I think we shall take a bit of a break because I imagine there might be some people who don't want to stay for the rest of the meeting, but we'll make it a short break for those of you who are waiting very patiently for other business. So we'll take, it's 8:11, we'll take to 8:20. Thank you. We'll reconvene at 8:20, and we're at agenda item number 7, County Council, Municipal Association, and Conservation Authority and committee updates. Is there any updates from any member of council? I have just a couple short ones. One of them is a Police Services Board meeting that we recently had. And we have a new provincial appointee, and he's a member of Innisfil. His name is Chris Garapi, and we're really excited to have him on the board. I will also tell you that there was an InnServices Enterprises meeting, but we heard about them already tonight. County Council, unfortunately, was postponed. County Council lost one of our members, Councillor Scott Jeremy from Oromadante, and his funeral was on Tuesday, so County Council will convene on December the 4th. And I also want to thank all of staff who helped out with the School Zone and Traffic Safety Committee open house that was held last evening. All right, now we'll go into the consent agenda and ask anyone who is interested in pulling items. If the item isn't pulled, that means the recommendation that is printed will be considered at the end of the meeting. But if your item's not pulled, the item that you're here and concerned about, then the recommendation in the staff report and on the screen will be confirmed later this evening. So we'll start with item A1, the special council minutes from November the 6th. The special council meeting dated November the 13th. A3, the regular council meeting minutes from November the 13th. B1, the School Zone Traffic Safety Advisory Committee minutes. We've dealt with C1 and C2. C3, the Lakeshore Water Pollution Control Plant Allocation Strategy. Councillor Waters? Refer to committee? Yes, please. C4, Delegated Authority for Adoption of Administrative Policies. C5, Water and Sanitary Lateral Servicing Costs. C6, South Innisfil Creek Drain. That's referred to committee. C7, the 2019 Municipal Drain Maintenance Assessments. C8, the staff report about speed limit changes on the 6th line. C9, the speed limit changes on 20th Side Road. C10, the Respectful Public Interactions Policy. Councillor Fowler is pulling that. Staff reports for information, there's 2 of them, a municipal drain update and the Stormwater Management Facility Compliance Inspection. E1. So before we go to that bylaw, I wanted to acknowledge that tonight is the last council meeting for a key member of our management team, Lockie Davis. Lockie's been our CFO and treasurer since 2010, and his contributions to Innisfil have been invaluable. Although I am going to miss Lockie, specifically his ability to find humor in any situation, I want to wish him well on his retirement or whatever comes next. I would like to turn it over to our CAO, Jason Rayner, so that we can properly acknowledge and thank Lockie for the time he has spent with us.
Thank you, Worship, members of council. Truly is an exciting evening, and it's with a very mixed heart that I bid a very fond farewell to my friend Lockie Davis, who was hired in 2010, I think almost the exact same day, if not the same day, that I was here at the town of Innisfil. You know, we could go on and on and on about Lockheed's key accomplishments, but I do want to take a minute to just highlight those for members of council who have not had the privilege of working with Lockheed for the last 10 years. He's provided exceptional strategic and operational expertise at a time of significant growth for Innisfil. When Lockheed and I started here, I think the engineering department had 2 CETs in it. And I won't quote how many engineers we have now, but a lot more, and they're expensive people. So, you know, there's been a lot of finance work over the last 10 years. He's spearheaded the adoption of by council of several key policies to ensure our long-term financial health. He's streamlined numerous processes, including the introduction of e-billing, e-time cards, electronic pay cards, under his leadership with procurement, the bid and go, electronic bidding. He's been a key contributor and leader for the development and implementation of our first multi-year budget and the shift to multi-year budget policy, which was a huge time savings in terms of resources, both for council and staff. He was instrumental in the creation of the first, and we believe only, municipal services corporation that serves water and wastewater for the community in Ontario. His recent leadership on the early adoption of the prudent investor standard, which council has been dealing with, and Lockheed's been instrumental with at the provincial level as well in aiding them in introducing that joint investment board through One Investments. And Lockheed has been always willing to take on whatever issues or challenges that face us, including cross-functional leadership through the One Town, One Team. He's been interim CFO for InnServices, as well as continue to help the myriad of companies and organizations that we have succeed. But you know, the things that I will miss most about Lockheed, besides his competence, which is exceptional, is really his personality. His ability to build strong, genuine, authentic relationships over long periods of time is actually quite a rare skill, and one that I will miss dearly. He's always willing to bring his expertise and advice to challenges that we have in the community and abroad throughout the province. He's built one of I think the strongest municipal finance team that is in the province. So he leaves us in very good stead. And my dad actually always said that the mark of a good leader is to leave the organization in a way that they don't need you, they actually can take over, and you've trained them up very, very well. And I think Lockheed has done that with his team. And in fact, tonight we'll see later on, well, now I guess, that we'll be moving Audrey into the treasurer role very, very shortly, or council will be considering that. He's supportive, he's humble, he's caring, he's honest. He asked me not to do this. I'm doing it anyways. He's true to his word. He's genuine. And I could, go on and on, but I understand that, we have the public here and they've been waiting very patiently for the rest of the agenda. So I'll just close by saying that Lockheed has been also not only our chief financial officer, but our chief humor officer, and has brought levity to some very tense meetings over the last many, many years. So I'll greatly miss you, Mr. Davis, and I wish you the very, very best in your future. Thank you, Your Worship. We also promised we wouldn't do this, but Your Worship, members of council, we have a small token of our appreciation for Mr. Davis. So if you might join us, Mr. Davis, perhaps we'll assemble over here.
We know how much Lockheed loves this. The one thing that I think is unfortunate is the finance team will no longer win the best Halloween costume anymore. Lockie, on behalf of all of council, thank you for making what I think is so dull, so much easier and so much fun to work with. You can take the most complicated budget issues and complicated situations and make me and everyone else understand what they are. But more importantly, you have been as steadfast about us building our reserves, our 1% capital levy, building our capital levy. And I don't know where we would have been without that. So thank you for being so steadfast and making us and making our corporation so financially sustainable. Thank you. All right, so continuing then with our bylaws. So E1 is the bylaw to appoint Audrey Webb treasurer and appoint Audrey Webb deputy treasurer as treasurer. Did anyone want to pull that? No. Congratulations, Audrey. Yes, Mr. Davis.
Your Worship, members of council, so this is really really important to me that Audrey is appointed. I think you've made a great choice here. She's very dedicated. Everything you said about me goes twofold for Audrey. She's been here a very long time. She'll give you dedication and everything, all the accolades you gave me go to her as well. So really happy that you've done this. I think you've made a great choice and really support your decision.
Thank you very much. And next is item E2, the bylaw to appoint a deputy treasurer. And that bylaw is to appoint Sharon Downey as interim deputy treasurer for the Corporation of the Town of Innisfil. Congratulations. Sharon, are you there? Congratulations. All right, moving on. F1, correspondence for action. That was the tabled item. Did anybody want to pull that? And benefit to the audience who didn't get the opportunity to see it, this is the opportunity through the Municipal Modernization Grant to apply for funding for any type of modernization. The deadline was December the 6th, so that's why it was important. It was time sensitive, and that's why we wanted to put it on the agenda tonight. I did have one question to Mr. Rayner on that. In the letter, it states that if you don't apply for the first tranche, it doesn't mean you can't apply for future ones. But is the opposite also true? If we apply for the first one, are we able to apply for the second and third?
Thank you, Your Worship. Yes, our understanding is that the multiple intakes may actually focus on different components of modernization and efficiency, and so we've not been given any information from the ministry that would suggest if you do apply for the first one, you won't get the second one or the third one. Our understanding right from the Chief of Staff to the Minister today was, in fact, that they will have different purposes, the specific intakes. So this one is about service delivery reviews, which we're going to stretch as far as we can to do a bunch of interesting things, including looking at our Municipal Services Corporation expansion. So absolutely, our recommendation is to apply and continue to apply to this grant funding. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Rayner. Next is items G are for correspondence. Seeing none, then we will go to the consent list. And so all the items except the ones that were pulled. A mover and a seconder, please. Councillor Nicol and Councillor Waters. All those in favor? That's carried. And now we'll resolve to committee, and that's moved by Councillor Sadi and Councillor Fowler. All those in favor? That's carried. So the first item of business was C3, and that was pulled by Councillor Waters.
Yes. Councillor Payne? I don't have any motions pertaining to the item. I just wanted to ask a couple of questions from staff. In the allocation that we're handing out, developments B, E, F, G, and H, the first question I want to ask is, were they part of the builders group? And second is, in the comments it mentioned that they provided community benefit, and that's why they got the allocation. So I wanted to find out what the community benefits were that these developments provided in order to get the allocation.
Mr. McKenzie?
Yeah, through you, Your Worship, to members of council. The community benefit that, so the item D comes out of the developer's share. So they are members of, they are a member of the group. So, and E through H are part lots that are in the middle of subdivisions that should have been allocated originally. It's just a housekeeping exercise. So they're like infill developments.
Thank you.
Any other questions? So all in favor of the motion as written? Opposed, if any? That's carried. Item C6, Deputy Mayor Davidson.
Thank you, Your Worship. I think the seconder.
I believe Councillor Nicol would like to second that.
Okay, great, thank you. I know the mayor wants to speak on this quite highly. I have been involved with this for 8 years, and it was started just before I got on council, so it's been a long time coming. So I'll let the Mayor Dolan speak on it, because it's been I know she's excited.
I'll pass the baton to Councillor Nicol.
Thank you, Worship. Honestly, I was hoping to refer this as well, too, just for discussion. I thought we needed to speak to it. It's almost 20 years later, and we're finally at a resolution, and the province is listening to and looking to address the Highway 400 culverts, which directly impact the drain and any improvements that we would make. To think this possibly could have been just a cleanup way back then, but the judge's order escalated it to almost an $8 million project. Thanks to the hard work and perseverance of Jason Inwood, Jeremy Nyhouse, and our staff, our residents such as Mr. Hordinski, and of course many members of council past and present, including our own Mayor Dolan, and many others who dedicated their time, such as former Councillor Simpson, who I saw in here today, who was chairing the appeals. We're finally at a point to finally close this chapter on this drain. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any other comments or questions? Councillor Van Berkel.
Thank you, Your Worship. I think Richard and I are going to go out and celebrate you tonight because it's been going on for 20. That's actually why he got off council and I got on, so he could.
Thank you very much. Yes, it's been a very long and I know tedious struggle for many of our residents, and we. I don't think we're finished with it yet, because when the work is done and the bills go out, we'll get calls and I'd never heard of that drain before. What are you talking about? But I think that that we've got to a really important step. I want to just thank and acknowledge Mr. Jeff Dixon from Burnsides, who's here tonight, and wondered, did you have any words that you wanted to say, Mr. Dixon, before we give this the third reading? So thank you for the work. Thank you for kind of coming to our rescue on this file. And, you know, if it's funny tonight is, you know, the first part of it was about creating a new future, and this is about closing a very old historic file. And very excited to give this a approve third reading to MTO and tell them to get to work. So with that, I'll call for the vote. All in favor of the recommendation? Those opposed? That's carried unanimously. A smattering of applause. Next is C10, and that was pulled by Councillor Fowler.
When this was brought forth, I was reading the documentation and whatnot, and there's a few things that have kind of stood out in my mind that I need some clarification on due to how it plays out with the community. Under the scope of application, it says in all verbal written communications, including email, phone, and via social media. The issue that comes to mind with me is that if someone is emailing directly and being abusive in their language or whatever, that's a direct point-to-point contact. If it's a phone issue that someone is calling either the town, counselor, whomever, on a repeated basis, that it becomes a harassment issue under the inappropriate standard. How does social media play into this? Because that's a third-party platform. What we have here is something that's removed directly from the town and the person of interest at this moment in time. It's no different than someone sitting in a restaurant and talking to a group of people. And how do we apply this in the scenario? It doesn't seem to fit with the other two.
Who's taking questions on this? Is it Louise? Oh,
I can address that one through
Ms.
you,
Verbosch.
Mayor Nolan. So the case law has acknowledged that social media is really the new town square where people come to express themselves, and we respect that. The policy is meant to address communications through the town's own social media platforms, where the expectation would be that town staff would act on it. So communication on private social media platforms or social media accounts, where there's no expectation that there would be action or investigation taken, wouldn't apply to this policy.
So in essence, if a resident has a page and they disagree with something that I, for example, say in a council meeting, that they can speak freely without any fear of repercussions, but if it's directly to the town itself on a town page, that's where it applies? Is that what I'm understanding?
Yes, I mean, no repercussions under this policy.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any other questions? Councillor Waters.
Thank you, Mayor. The question I want to ask is that usually when things get to this degree where residents are upset and they're getting angry, and that's when ill things are said to staff, it's usually because they think they've been wronged somewhere. And I'm speaking from experience in terms of having a few residents who feel that way. They feel they have no other avenues, and so it escalates. If we gave them an opportunity to have an avenue where they could resolve their issue without being shut down in a more calm setting, it might be worthwhile. And I remember Mayor Dolan mentioning to me a while ago the idea of having a mediator, a third party who would review these issues, that would take the temperature down and give them an opportunity, because sometimes residents feel that they're not being heard or they're being shut down, or they may not be as eloquent as they need to be. And so I'm wondering whether or not we might consider, as council, some sort of mediating process that would allow these people to have their say, have a third party review it, and come up with a recommendation. Now, it may not resolve the issue. The residents still might be happy, but at least they've had a third party who's not a town staff person or a counselor turn them down. So it was just an opportunity, whether or not, and I like the suggestion that Mayor Dolan mentioned to me, that the idea of having a mediator on retainer or something like that would take these very few, because I think these are, I'm thinking they're very few, I might be wrong, but take these very few cases and give those residents an opportunity for a fair hearing. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Parkin?
Thank you, and through your worship to Councillor Waters. We have certainly heard that mentioned a couple times here in council chambers, and actually I've been tasked to sort of look into that, see how we could potentially implement that, how it would look, who we would engage to do that, what the costs would look like, and hoping to come back to council in the first quarter of 2020 with a report sort of outlining what that could look like and how we could help residents resolve those types of concerns.
Excellent.
Thank you. I'm going to give you one example where I think something like that could work. So we have had a situation where it was a neighbor to neighbor dispute, totally civil. So nothing that the town was involved in, just two neighbors who basically didn't like each other, which we tried to resolve with a meeting with myself, the councillor, the deputy police chief, the chief building official, a bylaw officer, legal staff, and customer service staff. And since that meeting in the last 3 months, we've had 90 emails and 71 phone calls with 16 inquiries logged, just from that one incident. So that's, you know, if you look at the time involved and what those staff could have been doing, if we could have that solved so that issue didn't keep perpetuating. Having said that, I just want to hand it out to our customer service staff. They deal with some people that are just not extremely happy, and they have such great de-escalation skills. They've got great training. So to your team, Lisa, good job. Other questions or comments? Councillor Rossetti.
Thank you. I think when I read this policy, I thought, how sad it is that we've gotten to a point that we have to have policies like this in place. But when I look at how social media, television is influencing people and how we react, how we speak and communicate to each other, there's sometimes a great lack of respect, and people lose the filter of what is appropriate in dialogue and communication. And in my 5th year here on council, I have to say, when I read this, I thought how shocking it is, but in this past year, I've experienced even myself comments from residents that has dropped my jaw. And I just think it's a changing world. TV, social media, fake news, all the rest of that, and people react differently. Customer service excels at their job. And I'm amazed with how the calls and emails that they handle. And they're tremendous. I've reached out to them recently to get some coaching, even for me, in the changing in just this year. So I think a policy like this is needed. It's a reminder about respectful interaction from staff to council and council to the public. And it's necessary, even the way that we dialogue and communicate with our partners, such as developers in our business community. So it is necessary, and some may seem extreme, but I think that the staff have covered a lot with looking at the situations and filtering it and offering guidance. And there is a lot of frivolous times, sometimes where residents will request and request and request, as you pointed out, the mayor, your worship, how many times someone has asked staff to keep getting information because they're not getting the information they want to hear. Therefore, they keep asking. So a policy does need to be put in place.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments? Councillor Waters.
Just one other point I'd like to make is that I think residents, when they get this seriously frustrated, what will often come back to them is this is now a civil matter, and the town has removed itself from that platform. Many times the residents can't afford a legal matter, and I think this might be an alternative way of addressing these types of issues, so that when they get heard, they have a third party looking at it. It's financially easier on them, and they will stop because they will have heard a third party, and then that relieves the town of this ongoing and this rebuilding up of anger over time. So I think the mediation is a good alternative. Thank you.
Thank you, and I'll just add for those who hadn't seen the report that we're not inventing new ground here. We looked at several policies to form ours, including Mississauga, which was one of the first ones to come up with a policy. Wasaga Beach, Vaughan, Aurora. There's been many in our area, and I did reach out to colleagues in Mississauga who and I asked them how it worked for them, and they were. They said it isn't used very often, but that it's important that you have it in place. So when you can't put it in place after you've needed it. You need it in place for when you need it. So I think that hopefully we won't need to use it very often, and perhaps we can get a report back from staff after a few months to just gauge whether we've got the balance right on the language and make sure that that we're protecting both our residents to make sure that they do have a place to reach out, knowing that, regardless of what happens here, they've got the Ontario Ombudsman that they can go to at any time, so they've got that other level, but also to protect our staff from at the front lines. So, seeing no other comments, all in favor of the recommendation as written? Any opposed? That's carried unanimously. Next is our RISE recommendation, recommended by Deputy Mayor Davidson, second by Councillor Fowler. All those in favor? That's carried. And a recommendation to confirm tonight's Committee of the Whole. Councillor Van Berkel, Councillor Waters, all those in favor? That's carried. We did receive no notice of motion this evening. Announcements. Councillor Nicol.
Thank you, Worship. Just a quick reminder of the Cookstown Chamber of Commerce Light Up Night on Saturday. The light up starts at 6 and the parade at 6:30, and the weather looks great for one of the first years in a row that I can remember, so that's it.
Thank you. Any other announcements on this side? Councillor Payne.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just a reminder that Friday Harbor has got 2 days of seasonal festivities, tree lighting and a market. I think it's tree lighting on Saturday and the market on Sunday. And Sandy Cove Acres is having their tree lighting on Friday night. And that's it.
We think it's Thursday night. Thursday night at Sandy Cove. Okay, thank you, Councillor Payne. Councillor Ices.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just wanted to talk about the few things that went on this past week for myself. Was very honored to attend the South Simcoe Police Awards evening that was held last Thursday night. Great to acknowledge those people who watch over us and keep us safe in our daily lives. So that was really a good evening. Also, I got to be in the Santa Claus parade, holding a banner with Mayor Dolan. So that was a highlight. A shout out to Ice Corp for organizing that and doing just such a tremendous job in upbuilding our community. Also, on a sadder note, as was mentioned earlier, I attended the funeral yesterday for Deputy Mayor Scott Jeremy from Oro Medonte. He was also a farmer, and it was sad, but it was also great to reflect on a leader in the community, someone who has a love for his community, and to see those accolades of a job well done and a life well lived. So that's just an update from my life as Ward 1 councillor. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Orsatti.
Thank you. I just want to comment on the Santa Claus Parade as well, because One Town, One Team really demonstrated itself, proper phrasing, that took town staff, InnServices, the fire department, customer service staff, engineering, people, and for staff who volunteered their lunch hours to paint, and after hours to cut wood and take things home, and I still have sparkles all over my garage. But I also wanted to recognize that one thing that Innisfil Events Corporation did different that put Innisfil on the map again was, and it was on the news, was that in their parade, this is the second year that they've done that, they had an area that went from Innisfil Beach up to Tim Hortons that was a sensory quiet zone. No bands, no music, no sirens. It allowed residents and seniors that have dementia, children that have hyperactivity, that can't handle noise, to enjoy a parade in a quiet zone. And it was so well received, they've been asked to continue that on. So I really feel that they deserve some recognition for that. I'll be looking forward to participating, actually being able to be in the parade at the Cookstown one. So I will be there. And I'm looking forward to upcoming week, recognizing one of the residents at Lakeside Retirement that's turning 100 years, and also being able to join with the residents there for their Christmas celebrations.
Thank you. Any other announcements? I have just a couple. One of them, the YMCA, is having their 11th anniversary on Saturday. There'll be a pancake breakfast and a free skate from 10 to almost 2, I believe. And there's 2 tree lightings at our fire halls. There is the Alcona tree lighting on December the 6th and the Stroud tree lighting on December the 7th. And we're hoping really soon to have a tree lighting at our newest fire hall at Big Bay Point. So with that, the only other announcement is there's still a few days. If you've been unlucky enough to get a parking ticket, you don't have to pay it. You can simply Scrooge the ticket and donate a gift instead of paying your ticket. So any announcements for the good of the corporation? Mr. Keogh.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just one note that on the topic of the orbit and the GO station, I'm happy to report that we actually have a page that's just gone live. To Councillor Orsatti's note that we are looking for feedback. We do have a page that's live right now about getting feedback from our community about what amenities that they'd like to see in the GO station. The tagline, appropriately enough, is "It's go time." So, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Keogh. That's it for announcements. Then the confirming bylaw is moved by Councillor Fowler and Deputy Mayor Davidson. All those in favor? That's carried. And adjournment. Councillor Nickel, Councillor Van Berkel, all those in favor? And that's carried. Thank everybody for staying for the whole night, and have a great evening.